Okay, so this time we're diving into something a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's this guide by Shawn C. LeBrun, and it's called 12 Simple Steps to Get Huge. And I
Yeah.
know when you first see that title, you might be thinking like, okay, bodybuilding, right?
Right.
But, you know, as we went through it together, it's really interesting to see that the core principles that he's talking about, they actually have a lot of relevance, even if your goal isn't to like, you know, get as big as humanly possible.
Right. Yeah.
Um, You've talked before about wanting to kind of tone up and, you know, get that kind of lean, muscular look.
Hmm.
And a lot of the stuff in here, even though it's kind of packaged as this bodybuilding guide, there's a lot of really solid advice for anyone who's just trying to improve their fitness in general.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things that really stood out to me about the plan you shared was just how structured it is. Like,
Right.
he's got this 12-week plan that he kind of lays out week by week.
Yeah.
And he starts with goal setting,
Right.
which is so important.
Yeah.
And then he systematically goes through like weight training and cardio and nutrition
Yeah.
and even specific exercise recommendations.
Yeah.
So it's clear to me that, you're trying to gain a solid understanding of like a structured approach to fitness.
Hmm.
And this guide is definitely a really good resource for that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with this deep dive is like, okay, so let's unpack this guide.
Yeah.
Let's look past the title, you know, get huge, and like, let's extract, like, what are the real insights here?
Yeah.
How can we, set goals that are actually going to work for us
Mhm.
and understand like the core principles of training effectively and intensely?
Right.
And I think one of the things that's really compelling about his approach is he's all about simplicity and efficiency.
Yeah.
He's not trying to overwhelm you with like a million different things.
Yeah.
He's saying if you follow these principles with focus and intensity,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get results. And that really aligns with what you've said about like, you want to gain knowledge quickly. You don't want to be bogged down in like information overload.
Exactly.
So let's dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Week 1.
The primacy of goals.
This is such an important starting point. And he makes this really direct statement. Like,
Yeah.
everything we do has a reason.
Right.
And fitness is no different.
Right.
So he really challenges you to pinpoint what is your core motivation for pursuing this?
Yeah.
Is it to, improve your appearance
Mm-hmm.
or enhance how you feel?
Yeah.
Adopt a healthier lifestyle?
Right.
Increase your strength, boost your energy levels.
Mhm.
Like, what is it for you? And I love this philosophy he has. Change your thinking, then your body.
Yeah.
Like, it starts with your mind before you even start doing anything physical.
Yeah, it's like figure out why you're doing this before you even pick up a weight.
Exactly. You've got to understand your fundamental why.
Yeah.
And articulate the benefits you anticipate experiencing.
Yeah.
Like, really try to connect with the feeling of being more energetic.
Being more physically capable.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it's like getting that mental image of like
Exactly.
what it's going to be like to be that fitter, healthier.
Right. And to underscore the importance of clear goals.
Yeah.
He makes this really good analogy.
Okay.
It's like trying to drive from Maine to Florida without a map.
Okay.
You might be fully committed to the journey.
Right.
You might be willing to put in the time and the effort.
Yeah.
But without that defined destination and a clear route,
Yeah.
you're probably just going to end up wandering around aimlessly.
Yeah. And that's so true for fitness too. It's like,
Right.
if you don't know where you're going, how are you ever going to get there?
Exactly. And so for this first week,
Yeah.
he advises you to identify your top 3 compelling reasons
Okay.
for wanting to transform your physique and your overall well-being.
Okay.
And he expresses such conviction in this principle that he guarantees
T-given-teeth.
Yeah.
Okay.
that an internal drive and a greater sense of self-worth will naturally emerge.
Wow. Okay. So write down those goals and good things will follow.
That's what he says.
I like it.
And then he gives you some practical guidance on how to actually formulate these goals.
Okay.
So he suggests aiming for about a 50-50 chance of success.
Okay.
Challenging enough to be meaningful,
Yeah.
but not so unattainable that you're setting yourself up for discouragement.
Right. So like, you want it to be a challenge, but you also want to make sure it's something that you can actually achieve.
Exactly. And this is a key point.
Yeah.
He stresses physically writing down your goals
Okay.
to solidify them.
So it's like they go from just being thoughts in your head
Yeah.
to like a real tangible thing.
Exactly. They become commitments.
Oh, okay. I like it.
And he gives some really good examples of goals that are specific and measurable,
Okay. Like what?
like aiming to lose 1 pound of body fat each week,
Okay.
or increasing your bench press by 20 pounds within a month,
Okay.
or running a mile in under 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So these aren't just vague aspirations.
Right.
They are concrete targets
Yeah.
that allow you to track and assess your progress.
Mm-hmm. And he even defines like what a goal actually is in this context.
Right.
He's like, it's something that you are absolutely committed to achieving,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the obstacles.
At all costs.
Yeah.
Like the destination that must be clearly identified
Yeah.
before you even take the first step of the journey.
So it's like you got to have that endpoint in mind,
Yes.
and then you can figure out how to get there.
And without that, he says, your fitness efforts risk becoming a series of unproductive detours.
You're just wandering around.
Right.
So know where you are, know where you want to go,
Yeah.
and then you figure out the steps to get there.
Precisely. And it's interesting that even in this first week,
Yeah.
which is really all about mindset and goal setting,
Right.
he introduces a sample weight training routine.
Oh, okay. So he's not wasting any time.
No, he's not.
Getting right into it.
He specifies a rep range of 4-6,
Okay.
and he insists on pushing to the point of muscle failure,
Okay.
using a weight that presents a significant challenge right from the outset.
Interesting. So he's like starting off strong, right?
Yeah, like intensity is clearly a big theme from the very beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads us into, the core principles of weight training that he kind of elaborates on in the following weeks.
Right.
And one of his most emphatic points is that this idea of like more is better
Yeah.
when it comes to sets and reps, like he just completely dismisses that.
He does. He's very clear in his belief that quality trumps quantity.
Yeah.
He advocates for designing workouts that are simple and efficient,
Mm-hmm.
but executed with maximum intensity.
Okay.
And this is great for you because you're all about time efficiency.
Right.
So he's basically saying you don't need to spend hours and hours in the gym
Right.
doing tons and tons of reps to see results.
Yeah. So like less is more in a sense.
Yes, in terms of like sets and reps.
Okay. So it's all about that intensity.
Exactly.
So then he talks about this concept of progressively increased overload.
This is his cornerstone principle.
Yeah.
It's like the single most important factor driving muscle growth and strength gains.
So can you break down like what exactly that means?
So basically, our muscles are incredibly adaptive.
Yeah.
When you lift weights,
Mm-hmm.
you're putting stress on them.
Yeah.
And they respond by becoming stronger and larger
Okay.
to handle that stress better in the future.
So if you just keep lifting the same weight over and over again, your muscles are like, we got this.
Exactly. They have no reason to grow.
So you have to keep challenging them.
You have to keep upping the ante.
Yeah.
And that's where progressive overload comes in.
Okay.
You have to continually increase the demands placed on your muscles.
So like lifting heavier weights over time.
Exactly. It's like constantly raising the bar for your muscles.
Yeah.
They have to keep adapting to get stronger.
Okay. So that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And this directly supports his recommendation of like the 4-6 rep range. Why is that specific range so important for this overload?
Because this lower rep range allows you to lift heavier weights.
Yeah.
And heavier weights equal more overload,
Okay.
which equals more muscle stimulation.
So he's basically challenging this idea that high reps with lightweight are the key to toning.
Exactly. He says that's a myth.
Yeah.
Toning comes from reducing body fat
Mm-hmm.
and increasing lean muscle mass.
Okay.
Not from doing endless reps with tiny weights.
So it's not about like endlessly lifting those pink dumbbells.
Right.
It's about challenging yourself with a weight that's actually going to make your muscles grow.
Exactly. Even if your goal is to look leaner, you still need to build muscle to achieve that.
Okay. So what about the structure of the workouts he recommends?
So he's all about efficiency.
Yeah.
He advocates for 1 or 2 heavy, intensely focused sets per exercise.
Wow. That's it.
Yeah, he thinks the whole weight training session should ideally be no more than 45 minutes.
45 minutes?
Yeah, with the target of around 30 being optimal.
That's pretty short.
Right. He's all about maintaining that high level intensity. Yeah. He also emphasizes rest.
Okay.
At least 1 minute between warm-up sets.
Yeah.
2 minutes between those heavy muscle building sets.
Got it.
And here's a really important point.
Okay.
He recommends training each major muscle group only once every 7 days.
Once a week.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
I think a lot of people would be surprised by that.
I think so too. But his reasoning is all about recovery.
Okay.
Muscles need time to repair and rebuild
Yeah.
after intense training
Right.
before they can handle the next bout of overload.
And overload is key.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want your muscles to be fully rested and ready to go.
So they can lift even heavier weights the next time.
Precisely. And he makes this crucial point.
Yeah.
That actual muscle growth and repair occur during rest,
Okay.
not during the lifting itself.
So it's not like when you're in the gym lifting the weights that you're actually building muscle.
No, the training provides the stimulus,
Hmm.
but the growth happens when you're recovering.
Okay. I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
That a lot of people might not realize.
Yeah.
Now, he also talks about warming up before lifting.
Hmm.
What's his take on that?
He advises a brief warm-up,
Okay.
about 5 minutes of light cardio,
Okay.
just to get the blood flowing,
Yeah.
increase muscle temperature,
Right.
and then some lighter sets of the exercises you're about to do.
Okay.
The key here is to prepare the muscles
Oh, yeah.
without fatiguing them.
So you don't want to like waste all your energy warming up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also introduces this concept of acclimation sets.
Okay. I've never heard of that.
So let's say you're doing multiple exercises for the same muscle group.
Okay.
You don't need to do a full light warm-up set
Mm-hmm.
before each one.
Okay.
Instead, you do a moderate set of 68 reps
Okay.
to kind of further acclimate that muscle. So
Yeah.
it's all about efficiency.
So you're not wasting time with those late warm-up sets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's not a fan of pyramiding.
Pyramiding. What's that?
So pyramiding is when you gradually increase the weight with each set,
Mhm.
and then sometimes you decrease it again.
Okay.
He's like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
If the goal is to overload the muscle with heavier weight,
Right.
why would you reduce the weight?
Yeah. You're kind of going backward.
Exactly. He sees it as a waste of energy and focus
Mm-hmm.
that could be better used on sets that really challenge you.
Okay. So once you've hit that heavy set,
Yeah,
there's no point in going back down to lighter weights.
precisely.
Okay. And another thing he emphasizes is tracking your progress.
Yes, this is crucial.
Okay.
He's a big advocate of keeping a written log
Okay.
of the weights you use for every exercise.
Every single workout.
Yes,
Wow. He's serious about this.
he is. It's all about ensuring progressive overload
Yeah.
and taking the guesswork out of your training.
So you can see exactly when you need to increase the weight.
Exactly. If you're consistently doing more than 6 reps with a certain weight
Yeah.
and it feels easy,
Right.
it's time to increase the load.
To keep challenging those muscles.
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, he talks about rest.
Ah, yes. Rest is so important.
Yeah.
And it's often neglected.
Okay.
So after 2 months of consistent training,
Okay.
he recommends taking at least 5, ideally 7 full days off.
A whole week.
A whole week completely off from lifting.
Wow.
This gives your body a chance to fully recover,
Okay.
and it helps prevent overtraining.
Okay. So he's saying that intense weight training is actually a form of stress on the body.
Right, it is.
And like any stress.
Your body needs time to recover
Yeah.
and adapt.
Okay. And again, he's emphasizing that muscle growth and repair happens during these rest periods.
Yes,
So you're not actually building muscle when you're in the gym. You're building
Yeah.
muscle when you're resting.
exactly. The gym is just the stimulus.
The signal to grow.
Precisely.
Okay, so moving on to week 3,
Yeah.
we're getting into the topic of fat burning and cardio,
Hmm.
which I know is something that a lot of people are really interested in.
Especially if they're trying to get toned.
Yeah, exactly. What's LeBrun's overall philosophy on this?
He emphasizes a balanced approach. You
Okay.
can't just rely on cardio or drastically cutting calories.
Right.
He says the most effective way to lose fat is a combination of both,
Okay.
consistent aerobic activity and a good diet.
Got it.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
And then he also talks about how to assess if you actually need to lose fat.
Okay. Beyond just like looking in the mirror.
Right. He mentions things like using calipers.
Calipers.
Yeah, to measure subcutaneous fat
Okay.
and calculating your waist to hip ratio.
Mm-hmm.
These are more objective ways to gauge your body composition.
So you're not just relying on like subjective visual cues?
Exactly. And he also explains the whole apple versus pear thing.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so apple shape is where you carry more fat around your abdomen,
Okay.
and pear shape is more around your hips and thighs.
Right.
And he points out that the apple shape is associated with greater health risks.
Yeah, that abdominal fat is not good.
No, it's not.
So now a lot of people think that the key to burning fat is like endless hours of low intensity cardio
Right.
or like starving themselves.
Cutting calories drastically.
Yeah. What does LeBrun say about that?
He's not a fan of either of those extremes.
Okay.
He says doing tons of cardio every day for like an hour or more,
Yeah.
or severely restricting your calories.
That's just not sustainable.
Exactly. And it can actually be counterproductive
How so?
because it can lead to burnout,
Okay.
and it can also negatively impact your weight training.
Because you're so tired all the time?
Exactly. If you're chronically fatigued,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to lift with intensity.
Right. And intensity is key,
Exactly. And that's going to hinder your muscle growth.
which is important for fat burning in the long run.
Precisely.
So it's about finding that balance again.
Yes, consistency and moderation are key.
Okay, so what kind of cardio does he actually recommend?
He suggests about 30 minutes of high-intensity cardio,
Okay.
2 to 3 times a week.
So not every day. Okay, and he's talking about high intensity. Like, what does that actually mean?
So he actually compares cardio to weight training in terms of intensity.
Interesting.
He says you need to get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
You should be sweating.
Okay.
You should be panting.
So it shouldn't be a leisurely stroll?
No, he says things like casual walks
Yeah.
have minimal impact on fat burning.
Okay, so it's got to be challenging.
Yeah.
So how do you make your cardio workouts more intense?
So he gives some practical tips,
Okay.
like adding inclines if you're walking,
Okay.
or walking up hills,
Yeah.
swinging your arms,
Okay.
increasing your pace.
Got it.
So basically involving more of your body.
Yeah.
Which burns more calories.
Okay. And he also mentions other forms of cardio?
Yeah, like jogging,
Yeah.
mountain biking,
Okay.
using a Stairmaster or elliptical trainer,
Right.
even brisk treadmill, walking at a steep incline.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about efficiency.
So it's like, why spend an hour walking slowly when you could burn the same amount of calories in 20 minutes jogging?
Exactly. It's about maximizing your time.
Okay, and just like with weight training,
Yeah.
he stresses pushing yourself with your cardio too.
Yes. Every session, try to do a little bit more.
Okay.
Whether that's distance or speed,
Yeah.
that constant challenge is what keeps the intensity high.
And prevents your body from adapting too quickly.
Exactly.
And of course, he reminds us about the role of weight training in fat burning.
Yes. Weight training is a long-term investment
Okay.
because it builds lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
And muscle burns more calories at rest than fat does.
So the more muscle you have,
The higher your metabolism.
and the easier it is to burn fat.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're on to week 4,
Yeah.
and we're diving into nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And LeBrun makes this really bold statement that it's slightly more important than both weight training and cardio
I know, right?
for overall fitness goals.
Yeah, he's not messing around.
He's serious about nutrition.
He is. And his reasoning is that even the best training program can be sabotaged by a bad diet.
Yeah, you can work out all you want,
Right.
but if you're not fueling your body properly.
It's not going to make a difference.
So he reminds us that muscle growth happens during rest, and nutrition is essential for that recovery process.
Right. You need the building blocks to repair those muscles.
And to build new muscle tissue.
Exactly.
So what are the key nutritional elements that he focuses on?
So he outlines 5 main things:
Okay.
calories, protein, carbohydrates, fats, and water.
So kind of like the basic building blocks of nutrition.
Yeah. And he explains that calories are a unit of measurement
Okay.
for the energy in food,
Mhm.
while protein, carbs, and fats
Yeah.
are the macronutrients that actually provide our bodies with that energy
Okay.
and the building blocks for our tissues.
So each one plays an important role.
Yes. They all work together.
Okay. And then he introduces this 50-40-10 rule for daily calorie intake.
Right. So this is about the ratio of macronutrients.
Okay.
50% of your calories should come from protein,
Okay.
40% from complex carbs,
Mm-hmm.
and 10% from healthy fats.
Okay. So it's like a guideline for how to structure your meals.
Exactly. And ideally, every meal and snack
Yeah.
should roughly follow this ratio.
So that's a pretty significant emphasis on protein.
Yeah, he's a big believer in protein.
Okay. What does he say about protein sources?
So he warns against relying on those typical processed snacks.
Like chips and crackers.
Yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
Which are high in calories and unhealthy fats.
Right.
But low in protein.
They're not really giving you what your body needs.
Exactly.
So what should we be eating instead?
He recommends lean protein sources.
Like what?
Fish, poultry,
Mm-hmm.
lean red meat, eggs,
Okay.
dairy products, soy-based foods,
Yeah.
legumes, things like that.
Okay.
And he also highlights whey protein as a really good supplement.
Whey protein.
Yeah, because it has a high biological value.
What does that mean?
It means it's easily digested and used by your body
Okay.
for muscle growth and repair.
So it's like a super efficient way to get protein.
Exactly.
Okay, what about carbs and fats? There's so much conflicting information out there.
I know, right?
Everyone's got a different opinion.
So LeBrun explains that carbs are primarily our body's energy source.
Okay.
But he makes a distinction between simple and complex carbs.
Right.
Simple carbs are like sugars,
Yeah.
found in fruits and processed foods.
Okay.
Complex carbs are found in whole grains and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And he recommends prioritizing complex carbs
Okay.
because they provide more sustained energy.
So you don't get those sugar crashes.
Exactly.
And he also addresses this myth that carbs are inherently fattening.
Yes, he debunks that myth.
Okay.
He says it's actually an excess of calories.
Regardless of the source.
Exactly. That leads to fat storage.
So if you eat too many carbs,
Yeah.
your body will store those extra calories as fat,
Right.
just like it would with any other excess calories.
Besides,
Okay, so what about fat?
so fat is necessary for things like hormone production and nutrient absorption,
Oh, okay.
but it's also very calorie dense.
So a little bit goes a long way?
Exactly.
Okay.
So he advises keeping your fat intake moderate
Got it.
while still making sure you're getting enough healthy fats.
Okay, so it's not about eliminating fat entirely.
No, it's about finding that balance again.
Right, moderation.
Yes.
Okay, and then of course he talks about water.
Water is so important.
Yeah.
It's involved in so many bodily functions.
Like what?
Digestion, nutrient absorption, temperature regulation,
Yeah.
waste removal.
It's like the lifeblood of our bodies.
It is, and he points out that a lot of people don't drink enough.
Yeah, we're chronically dehydrated.
Yeah.
So how do you know how much water you should be drinking?
It depends on a lot of factors.
Okay.
But a good rule of thumb is to drink half your body weight in ounces.
So if you weigh 150 pounds.
You should aim for about 75 ounces of water per day.
Okay, got it.
And now let's talk about calories,
Oh.
because he gives some guidance on how to calculate your individual needs.
Okay, that's helpful because everyone's different.
Exactly.
So how do you figure that out?
So he provides some formulas
Correct.
based on your body weight and activity level.
So like if you're more active,
Yeah,
you need more calories.
exactly.
Okay.
And then once you have an idea of your maintenance calories,
Yeah.
if you're trying to lose fat, he suggests creating a calorie deficit
Okay.
around 150 to 200 calories per day.
But not too much.
Right. He cautions against drastic reductions.
Yeah, because that can backfire.
Exactly. It's not sustainable.
Okay, so what about meal timing?
So he recommends eating 5-6 smaller meals per day.
Smaller meals.
Yeah, spaced every 3-4 hours.
Okay.
And he emphasizes protein again,
Of course.
at least 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Okay.
And he also suggests combining protein with complex carbs.
Okay. Why is that?
It helps lower the glycemic index of the carbs, which means you get a more sustained energy release.
So you don't get those energy spikes and crashes.
Right.
And he gives some examples of good combination.
Like whole grain bread with peanut butter,
Okay.
oatmeal with eggs,
Mm.
chicken with rice.
So it's about balancing those macros.
Exactly.
Okay. And he even includes like a sample meal plan.
Yeah, he gives you a good starting point.
That's helpful.
And he also talks about meal replacement products.
Okay.
He sees those as a valuable tool,
Yeah.
especially for fat loss,
Okay.
because they're convenient.
Right.
They're high in protein,
Yeah.
and they have controlled calories.
So it's like a quick and easy way to make sure you're hitting your macros.
Exactly. He recommends looking for ones with around 30-40 grams of protein,
Okay.
moderate carbs, and low fat.
Okay.
And he even mentions some brands that he likes.
Okay. So he's not just like anti-all meal replacements.
No, he thinks they can be useful if you choose the right ones.
Right. It's all about making informed choices.
Ex-
So now we're on to week 6.
Yeah.
And the topic is intensity.
It's the reason behind success.
Yeah, he's really hammering this point home.
He says intensity is absolutely crucial for seeing results.
And it's tied to that progressive overload we talked about earlier.
Right, you can't have one without the other.
Okay.
So he describes intensity as developing that mind-muscle connection.
So it's like really feeling those muscles working.
Exactly. You have to be present in your workouts.
Yeah.
You can't just be going through the motions.
So I'm not about just checking the boxes.
No, you have to really put in the effort.
Okay. And this ties back to that 4-6 rep range.
Yes, that lower rep range forces you to lift heavy, which means you have to be more intense.
Okay.
It's those short bursts of maximal effort
Yeah.
that really stimulate muscle growth.
Okay. So it's not about spending hours and hours lifting light weights.
No, it's about short, intense bursts.
Okay. And he relates